Poor single mechanic dad fixes a farmer's truck, not knowing she's a millionaire heiress daughter. The rain lashed against the windshield like 1,000 tiny hammers. David Hayes squinted through the streaked glass, his tired hands gripping the wheel of his rusted old pickup as he navigated the winding, muddy roads outside Asheville, North Carolina. In the back seat, 5-year-old John was fast asleep, curled under a frayed fleece blanket, thumb in mouth. The dashboard clock blinked 10:42 p.m. David sighed, the ache of a 12-hour shift still weighing down his shoulders. Then he saw it. A plume of steam rising into the air ahead, like a ghost trying to escape the storm. As he crested the hill, his headlights caught the outline of a red truck, pulled to the roadside, its hazard lights flashing weakly in the dark. A figure stood beside it, waving both arms. David slowed, pulling over onto the gravel. Raindrops pelted his hood as he stepped out, toolbox in hand. He approached the woman carefully, noting her soaked jeans, her drenched boots, her wool coat sticking to her frame. Her blonde hair clung to her face in wet tendrils. "My car is dead. Can you help me?" Her voice trembled. David blinked. Vietnamese? No, he'd misheard. She switched quickly to English. "Sorry, I meant my truck died. Can you help?" David wiped the water from his brow, studying her for a moment. "I'll try, but in weather like this, you should wait inside my truck. It's warm." She shook her head, crossing her arms tightly. "I just need the engine running. I can't be late getting home," he nodded, dropping to one knee. Tools clinked as he opened the red truck's hood, a blast of steam escaping like a sigh. He worked quickly, hands steady despite the cold. She stood nearby, shivering, glancing occasionally at the sleeping child visible through the fogged windows of David's truck. "You're out late," he said, not looking up. "So are you," she replied, hugging herself tighter. 10 minutes later, the engine rumbled to life. David closed the hood with a clunk and took a step back, rubbing his palms on his jeans. She looked at him, blinking through the rain. "How much do I owe you?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just pay it forward." She hesitated, reaching into her pocket, but he was already walking away. He opened his truck door gently, careful not to wake John. Then, as if remembering something, he turned back. Opening the passenger door of her truck just a crack, he placed a bottle of water on the seat. Next to it, a small folded note, scrawled with his clumsy handwriting. "Drink this. It's cold out." She climbed into the driver's seat and stared at the bottle. Her fingers brushed the note. When she looked up, his truck was pulling back onto the road, taillights disappearing into the darkness. Inside her cabin, the engine hummed quietly. Ava Bennett placed the bottle carefully in the cup holder, eyes following the imprint of tire tracks through the muddy road. She leaned back, heart still pounding, not from fear, but from something quieter, gentler. Her fingers reached for her phone, and she typed his license plate into her notes app. David never glanced back. He did not know that Ava Bennett was the only daughter of Marshall Bennett, owner of the sprawling Bennett Farms empire. He had no idea she was worth millions. To him, she had just been a stranded stranger on a rainy night, like so many others he had stopped for. No titles, no wealth, just a woman needing help. And for Ava, that was the first time in years someone had looked at her and seen nothing but a human being. The trailer groaned in the wind, its aluminum walls creaking as gusts slid through the cracks. David stood at the tiny sink, wiping grease from his hands with a rag too stained to be useful. Outside, the driveway had turned to mud from the rain. Inside, 5-year-old John sat cross-legged on the couch, crayons clutched tight as he colored a green dinosaur. Their single-wide home was more patchwork than structure. Roof, leaking in 3 spots, patched with duct tape and quiet hope. A stack of unpaid bills sat on the cluttered table, until David, noticing John glance over, quietly shoved them into a drawer. "Daddy, can I have peanut butter for lunch?" David smiled. "Extra jelly, coming right up." He didn't mention they were almost out of both. At the garage, David parked in his usual spot. His second shift was just starting. The first had ended an hour ago across town. His limbs ached, but there were tires to rotate, engines to check. Rest was a distant dream. Then he saw her, Ava, stepping out of the same red truck he had helped the night before. She wore jeans tucked into well-worn boots, blonde hair in a braid, holding a brown paper package. "I brought something for John," she said with a tentative smile, handing him the bundle. David opened it to find a ham and cheese sandwich, cut neatly in half. His stomach growled before he could thank her. "He's with a neighbor today," he said, "but he'll love it." She nodded. "Just wanted to say thanks again for stopping." He studied her. Simple clothes, a grounded calm, maybe a farmer's daughter. "Glad I could help," he said. She lingered near the bay, watching him work. He moved carefully, pressing his back with a palm as if to keep it from giving out. He carried weight heavier than engines. That night, John ran to greet him barefoot. "Daddy, look," he said, holding a toy tractor. Ava must have left it. David ruffled his son's hair, then pulled a faded blue cap from the closet. He knelt and placed it on John's head. "Wear this, okay? So Mama Ava doesn't worry." John giggled. Ava, who had returned with a tin of cookies, stood on the porch and heard him. She didn't speak, but her chest tightened at the gentleness in David's voice, the kind that spoke of love, not pity. Later, as David worked on Ava's truck again, she lingered nearby, pretending to scroll her phone. "These hospital bills, man. 3 jobs and I still had to choose between heat and asthma meds." David hadn't meant to say it aloud. He didn't know she heard. That night, Ava sat on her porch, tea cold in her hands. After a long pause, she pulled out her phone. From a private account, she sent funds to David's, enough to cover the medical bills. It looked like a parts refund. No name, no note, just quiet help. The next morning, David blinked at the deposit in his banking app. No client mistake, just money. His chest tightened. "Ava?" He glanced at the cookies she had left in the break room. Still warm, untouched. That evening, he drove home with John snoring in the back seat, a cartoon humming softly from the tablet Ava had lent them. "She's kind," he muttered. But as their trailer came into view, his jaw tensed. Too kind? He didn't know. Only that she made things feel lighter when she was near, and that made him wary. Ava, sitting in her truck across the street from the garage, watched the taillights disappear into the dark. She wanted to help. She just didn't know how to, without losing him before she ever truly had him. The morning sun cast long shadows over Bennett Farms, stretching across rolling hills and white fences. The estate's colonial mansion stood still, polished, distant. Ava sat by her bedroom window, watching a barn owl vanish into the trees. This house had always been home, but the word no longer meant much. She zipped her windbreaker, pulled a cap over her ponytail, and slipped out through the back entrance, avoiding staff, cameras, and her father's cold scrutiny. She preferred the flannel and boots that made her invisible, just another worker on land her family owned. Today she headed to David's garage again, a duck puzzle in hand from the farmer's market. John liked animals. She hoped it might make him smile. David was half under a jeep, only his boots showing. She placed the puzzle on the counter and waited until he slid out, face smeared with grease. "You again," he said, half smiling. "Running a tab?" she teased. "Only if you charge for smiles," he replied, tired but soft. She reached to wipe a smudge of oil from his brow. He froze, then stepped back. That afternoon they sat on crates, sipping from mismatched thermoses. David opened up about raising John alone after his ex left just a week after birth, about his mom dying before meeting her grandson, and how college dreams gave way to double shifts. "People think being a single dad is just packing lunches," he said, "but it's everything. Every fever, every tear, alone." Ava nodded, but her throat was tight. She wanted to tell him who she really was. Ava Bennett, heir to Bennett Farms, but fear kept her silent. "You're quiet today," David said. "Just listening," she smiled weakly. The truth? She was scared. Her ex hadn't just broken her trust. He'd taught her that love could be transactional. What would David do if he found out her last name? Build walls? See her as a bank? That night, she reread a note David once left. "Call this one on the house. John likes you." She held it close to her chest. A week later, her father summoned her. "I hear you've been frequenting some garage off County Road 9, he said flatly. Ava crossed her arms. "You're embarrassing yourself. The board won't like the heir of Bennett Farms playing house with a mechanic. He's a good man, a father." "He's nothing. If you continue, I'll freeze your accounts." She didn't flinch, though her heart pounded. Her family always measured worth and assets, not kindness. Later, Ava walked alone through the West Orchard. Her phone buzzed. A message from David, just a photo, John holding up the duck puzzle, grinning, one tooth missing. Ava sat beneath a tree and cried. She couldn't walk away. Not from them. So she acted quietly. No announcements, no headlines. She arranged for anonymous shipments to David's garage, tools he needed but could never afford. She used a private courier, no trace. He never asked. She kept coming back. Sandwiches, toys, jokes about rust, always in boots, never in heels. The heiress no one recognized. And maybe that was the only way to stay near him. For now. The invitation came in the form of a handwritten note left on the garage counter beside 2 apples and a toy dinosaur. "Bring John to the farm this Saturday. I could use your opinion on some old machinery, eh?" David read it twice, then once more. It had no formal tone, no address, and yet it pulled at him. He folded the paper and slid it into his pocket, uncertain. But later that night, when John found the toy dinosaur and squealed with joy, his decision was made. "You mean the big farm with horses?" John asked, eyes sparkling. David chuckled. "That's the one." Saturday arrived draped in sunlight and the crisp smell of hay. David drove through the winding road toward the Bennett estate, his truck rattling as it passed vast pastures and fences that looked freshly painted. He gripped the wheel a little tighter. This wasn't a place for men like him. Ava stood at the entrance to the barn in jeans, boots, and a denim jacket rolled at the sleeves. Her blonde braid peeked from under a cap. She waved as they approached. John jumped out first. "Miss Ava!" he shouted, running straight into her hug. Ava laughed. "There's my favorite assistant." David stepped out slowly, his eyes scanning the land. Everything was too neat, too perfect. He muttered, "Some farm you got." "I said I needed help with machines," she teased. "Didn't say it wasn't a big farm." She led them toward a greenhouse where small tools and a bucket of seeds were laid out. "We're planting carrots today," she told John, kneeling beside him. David stood at a distance, arms crossed, observing. The sunlight caught the gold in Ava's hair as she guided John's little fingers over the soil. He spoke up. "I used to dream of something like this, you know. Not the big house, Just a place to call my own. A garage, a workshop. Fix what I want, teach John along the way. Ava looked up. Why didn't you do it? He hesitated. Life got in the way, dreams turned into diapers and double shifts. Her expression softened. You'd be good at it. Later, when John napped in the truck, David returned to the porch where Ava sat, sipping iced tea. He pulled something from his pocket. I owe you for today, he said. John hasn't laughed that much in months. He handed her a small wooden toy truck, carved and sanded by hand, initials JH beneath the hood. Made it a while ago. Maybe it belongs here now. Ava held it as if it were glass. Thank you, she whispered. She placed it gently on her kitchen counter later that night. Underneath it was a folded note. Thanks for making John laugh. Days passed. Then John fell sick. A stubborn fever clung to him for 2 days. David kept his cool. Barely. Cool cloths, cold cereal, whispered lullabies while panic ate at his chest. At the pharmacy, the clerk refused the prescription until payment cleared. His card was declined. That night, David sat on the porch, elbows on his knees, heart racing. In the morning, a small brown paper bag rested beside the screen door. Inside, sealed medicine, exactly what the prescription required. No note, no receipt. He looked around, breath held. No car tracks, no footprints. He gave the meds to John, kissed his damp forehead and said, You'll be okay, champ. Ava never mentioned it. John got better. Laughter returned. The old spark came back into his eyes, and David, he began to see Ava differently. How she knew what John liked, how she let him get muddy, how she listened. He thought of her at night, of her hands in the soil, of the way she never asked for praise, of how she looked at him like he mattered. But he kept a step back. He had been hurt before. He had loved and been left. Ava felt the distance, too. Every time she wanted to reach out, fear held her back. She wanted to tell him who she was, what she had. But what if he walked away? She couldn't risk it. Not yet. So she kept it slow, quiet, seed by seed, laugh by laugh. And David, still wary, still healing, began to wonder, maybe not every good thing has to disappear. Maybe some were meant to stay. The headline practically screamed off the glossy page of the Asheville Gazette, Hidden Heiress, Ava Bennett, daughter of Bennett Farms tycoon, seen in local garage. David stood behind the counter, the newspaper open in his grease-streaked hands, his stomach sinking like a stone in water. The accompanying photo showed Ava in her jeans and ball cap, smiling as she handed a sandwich to a sleepy-eyed John near the entrance of the shop. The caption read, The billion-dollar farmer's daughter blends in with the working class. But why? The room spun. David's fingers curled around the paper. The truth exploded in his chest like a backfire. Ava Bennett. The Ava who brought sandwiches, who planted carrots with John, who knelt beside him in the dirt and laughed like the world owed her nothing. He had trusted her. He had begun to hope. Now he felt played. The shop door creaked. Ava stood there, eyes wide, wind-blown hair framing a face flushed not from the cold, but from fear. I didn't know they'd publish that, she said softly. I didn't want it to happen this way. David said nothing. His jaw tightened. I was going to tell you, she continued, but every time I tried, I saw how freely you talked to me, how different you looked at me, and I was scared you'd stop. He slammed the paper onto the counter. You lied. I just didn't tell you everything. That's a lie by omission, he snapped. Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out the woman you're starting to trust is actually a billionaire playing dress-up." Her face twisted. "I never played anything. You think I wanted to be raised behind gates, used as a trophy, lied to by people who only wanted a piece of my last name?" "You're still part of that world," he said, voice low. "I'm not." Silence. David turned, retreating toward the back of the garage. "Take your money, your secrets, your farm. I don't need any of it." Ava stood frozen. She had expected confusion, even anger, but not this wall of hurt, cold and unrelenting. She left without another word. That night, David stared at the dinner he could not eat. John sat quietly beside him, coloring in a half-torn book. "Is Miss Ava coming back?" the boy asked. David didn't answer. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, David placed a small mason jar on the front step of Ava's farmhouse. Inside was a collection of wildflowers, simple, untamed. Beside it, folded neatly, a piece of brown paper with 5 words. "John still likes you. D." Ava found it moments later. She held the jar against her chest and cried. For the next few days, they did not see each other. The distance ached more than either had anticipated. Then, one rainy Thursday, Ava walked into the garage again. This time she did not bring sandwiches or toys. She brought herself, bare, unguarded. David looked up, surprised. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but I can't stay away and pretend I didn't care. I meant every moment, the carrots, the carved truck, the way John says my name." He put down his wrench slowly. She stepped closer. "I'm not here to fix your life or change it. I fell for who you are. The man who gave me water in the rain, who carved toys for his son, who taught me more about kindness than any millionaire ever could." David's expression softened. His shoulders slumped, the anger draining out of him like oil from a loosened valve. "I wanted to believe it didn't matter," he said finally, "that I could just accept what was right in front of me. But when that story broke, it felt like everything real got rewritten." Ava took a breath. "Then let's write it again, this time, together." He looked at her, really looked. Not the rich girl, not the heiress, just Ava. Maybe she was more than her last name, and maybe he was more than the weight of his doubts. Outside, the clouds began to part, letting just enough light through to make the puddles shimmer. They stood in the doorway, unsure what would come next. But for the first time since the article broke, they were facing it together. "Let me help you open your own garage," Ava said gently, her eyes searching David's face. They were standing by the fence of the Bennett farm, the late afternoon sun casting golden light over the fields behind them. David's jaw clenched as he stared past her, watching John chase a butterfly near the shed. "You mean pay for it," he replied, voice sharp. "You want to buy me a life I should earn myself." Ava blinked, surprised by the edge in his tone. "No, I want to invest in something you already built with your hands, with your heart." David stepped back. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," she said, taking a step forward. "It's belief." He shook his head. "It feels the same. I've spent my whole life trying to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm not about to become someone's pet project." Ava opened her mouth, but he was already walking away. Unseen behind the barn, John had been sitting on a haystack, tying his shoes. He heard every word. That night, back in their trailer, John sat on his bed, arms crossed. "Why don't you like Miss Ava anymore?" he asked, voice small. David looked over, sighing. It's not that, buddy." "Then why were you mad? She likes you. She brings sandwiches and laughs at your dumb jokes." David managed a faint smile. "Some things are just hard." John frowned. "Is it hard to let someone help when they want to?" David had no answer. The next day, he walked into the garage, but couldn't focus. Every tool felt heavier. Every task took longer. Ava's offer circled in his mind like a fly he could not swat. That evening, he returned to the Bennett farm, not to talk, but to think. The farm was quiet, the sun dipping below the horizon. He found John's old rusted bike near the barn and wheeled it to the garage behind the house. For the next 2 hours, David cleaned the chain, replaced a tire, and tightened every bolt until the thing looked nearly new. In the early morning, before anyone woke, he placed the bike by the porch with a folded note taped to the handlebars. "Thank you for giving John space to smile, Mercy D." Ava found it at sunrise. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note. She touched the seat of the bike, then stepped inside without a word. That same day, David sat with his hands buried in his hair. He replayed Ava's words, John's question, his own pride getting in the way again. He thought of his wife walking out the door 5 years ago, how broken he had been, how hard it had been to trust anyone again, how part of him still feared that kind of abandonment more than poverty itself. He had taught himself not to need, not to ask, not to hope. But Ava had never asked for anything in return. She had only given, and she had never once made him feel smaller. That night, David sat beside John, watching his son sleep with arms wrapped around a stuffed dog Ava had given him weeks earlier. He looked at the child's peaceful face and whispered, "You deserve a whole world. Maybe I've been afraid to let someone help us build it." At dawn, David returned to the Bennett farm. Ava was watering a line of tomatoes near the porch. She looked up when she saw him, unsure. "I was wrong," David said, "about what it means to accept help, about you." Ava stood silent, her grip tightening around the watering can. "I let my pride talk louder than my heart," he continued. "And that's not the man I want to be for John, or for you." She lowered the can slowly. "Then who do you want to be?" He walked closer. "Someone who's not afraid to start again, someone who knows that letting someone in doesn't make you weak." Her eyes filled. "So, what now?" David offered a shy smile. "Now I fix what I broke." And for the first time since his wife left, he didn't feel like he was patching holes in his life. He felt like he was building something new. The sun filtered through the tall trees of the Bennett farm, casting playful shadows over the grassy clearing where a checkered blanket was laid out. Sandwiches, lemonade, and apple slices sat untouched as John pedaled his bike in wide loops across the open space, laughter trailing behind him. Ava sat beside David on the edge of the blanket, watching the boy with a soft smile. "He's grown so much," she said. David nodded, arms crossed over his chest. "He's always been strong, stronger than I gave him credit for." Ava tilted her head. "Maybe he gets that from his dad." David gave a soft chuckle, but said nothing. "You look beautiful, David," he said. "Huh? Me?" Yvonne looked at her face and said. The air between them was calm, unspoken truths still hovering like dust in sunlight. Then, suddenly, John's front wheel hit a dip in the ground. The bike jerked sideways, and in a flash the boy tumbled to the earth. His scream cut through the warm afternoon like a knife. David surged forward, but Ava was faster. She sprinted across the clearing, heart hammering. John lay curled on his side, clutching his scraped knee, tears streaming down his face. "Mama!" he cried instinctively, reaching for her. Ava dropped to her knees, pulling him into her arms without hesitation, her breath caught in her throat as the word echoed in her ears. "Mama!" David froze a few steps away. His chest tightened as he watched them. Ava held John close, whispering softly, wiping his tears. He knelt beside them. "Hey, buddy," David said gently, brushing hair from John's forehead. "It's just a scrape." John looked at him, sniffling. "I called her Mama." "I know," David replied, his voice quiet, full of emotion. Ava met his eyes. They were wide and unsure, as if asking, was that okay? Did it cross a line? But David only smiled, deep, steady, honest. He pulled them both into a hug. Back at the farmhouse, after John had fallen asleep on the couch, with a bandage on his knee and Ava's scarf as a pillow, David and Ava stood on the porch in the fading light. "I've spent years being afraid," David said suddenly. "Afraid of needing someone, of letting anyone close to John, of letting anyone close to me." Ava turned to him, listening. "But then you came along," he continued, "with your sandwiches and your wildflowers, your quiet kindness and your stubborn heart, and suddenly I found myself wanting." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn key on a fraying string. "This," he said, placing it in her hand, "was the key to my first toolbox, then to my first locker, then to the garage where I fixed our first car after John was born." Ava looked down at the key, then up at him, eyes wet. "It's yours now," David said, "because this life, whatever it becomes, I want to build it with you, not because of what you have, but because of who you are. You make John laugh, like a child should, and you make me want to be more than I am." Ava's lips trembled. "I've never wanted anything more than I want this." She stepped forward, closing the distance, and wrapped her arms around him. David held her tightly, the key still clutched in her palm between them. The moon rose above the Bennett farm, casting silver light on the quiet house, the worn bike leaning against the fence, and 3 hearts finally beating in rhythm. For the first time, David did not see his life as broken pieces he was struggling to keep together. He saw a future, with room for laughter, for healing, and for love. And it started with a boy who called a woman Mom without being told to. 6 months later, the worn metal sign that once read Hayes Auto Repairs had been replaced with a hand-painted one, John's Garage. Underneath, in smaller print, were the words, Community Repair, No One Left Behind. The garage sat on the edge of Asheville, nestled between 2 maple trees that burst into gold each autumn. The morning sun poured through the open bay doors, casting warm streaks over the cement floor. Inside, laughter echoed. Light, familiar. David stood beneath a lifted sedan, grease on his hands, a calm smile on his face. Nearby, Ava worked with an elderly woman who had come in with a flat tire and no money to spare. Ava showed her how to patch it herself, kneeling on the ground in her jeans and flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up. John darted around with a toy wrench in one hand, pretending to fix invisible engines. "Mom, look what I did!" he shouted, holding up a bolt. Ava turned, smiling wide. "Nice work, mechanic!" David glanced over from beneath the car, the word Mom still hitting his heart like a miracle each time. No one had told John to say it. No one had asked him to choose. He simply did. Later that afternoon, when the last customer had left and the garage quieted, Ava walked toward the office. She found David standing in front of the wall they had left blank for months. "Thought it was time," he said softly. He held a drawing in his hands, John's work from weeks ago. It was simple. 3 stick figures, all smiling. One tall with dark hair, one with blonde curls, and a smaller one between them holding both their hands. Above the figures in crooked letters it read, "My family." David taped it up gently. When Ava stepped closer, she saw he had written a note beneath it. "This is our home." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I did not know a grease-stained wall could feel like the safest place in the world." David chuckled. "You make anything feel like home, Ava." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I sold my shares," she whispered after a moment. David pulled back to look at her. "What?" "I kept enough to take care of my mother, but the rest I used to start a rural outreach fund. For single parents, for workers, for families like yours, like ours." David stared at her, struck speechless. "I realized I do not want boardrooms or power plays," she continued. "I want this. Real people, real help, real love." He pulled her into a hug, tighter than before. "You're incredible." "No," she murmured. "Just finally honest with myself." Outside, John's laughter rang through the open garage doors again. David and Ava stepped out, watching their son race a toy truck along the gravel. "You know," David said, "I used to believe I was stuck, that life had decided who I could be. And now I believe life might still surprise me." Ava reached for his hand. "Let's keep surprising each other." As the sun dipped below the Carolina hills, the family stood together under the painted sign, the wind carrying the scent of oil, grass, and something new, hope. The garage light glowed softly behind them, welcoming anyone in need, and carved into the door frame, almost too small to notice, were the words, "Built on kindness, run by love," because in the end, kindness had rerouted their fates, and love, unassuming, patient, and strong, had done the rest. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of kindness, and stirred something deep within your soul, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you real human emotions, tales of unexpected connections, and reminders that love can bloom in the unlikeliest of places. Whether it's a lonely mechanic, a hidden heiress, or a child's innocent hope, our stories are here to move you, to heal you, and to remind you of what truly matters. If you want more heartfelt narratives like this, be sure to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your day or your life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling, and remember, the smallest act of kindness may be the beginning of someone's everything. We'll see you in the next story.